The movie starts with a scene showing a big villa. After a while, a strange distorted voice is heard talking about a woman's behavior. In the corner of a very dark room, we see a woman, but her face is hard to recognize. The strange voice keeps playing as the woman starts running, moving from one side of the villa to the other. She grabs the head of a statue and holds it tightly against her chest. The voice turns into screams and loud static noise. Suddenly, the woman falls off a railing. It feels like these events happened in the past, like a memory or flashback. The next scene shows Evie, who is working at a fancy conference center, serving desserts. After she's done, she goes back to the kitchen and talks with her coworker about the tips she got. She mentions that one of the dollar bills has a phone number written on it. As they're about to leave, her friend Grace gives her a bag that contains Evie's DNA test results. Evie returns home. We see her doing pottery, which seems to be her hobby. Later, she lies in bed and listens to a voice message from her late mother. Her mom wishes her a happy birthday and praises her for being such a good artist. As the message plays, Evie lies quietly thinking. Then she opens her laptop and watches an ad for a family match service. The ad says, if you want to find your family, just send in your DNA report and get the answers you're looking for. The next morning, Evie drops her DNA results in the mailbox. That evening, while chatting with Grace, she receives an email informing her that a cousin named Oliver has matched with her DNA profile. The message says Oliver will be in New York next week and would like to meet for coffee. Grace warns Evie not to trust the results and advises against meeting a complete stranger. Despite this, the next scene shows Evie meeting Oliver in a restaurant. After a formal introduction and small talk, Oliver invites Evie to a wedding party for their supposed mutual cousin. Though hesitant at first, Evie eventually agrees. Next, we see Evie arriving at the airport on the phone with Grace. Oliver is already there waiting for her and greets her warmly. They drive together to the wedding venue, which turns out to be a grand mansion. Amazed by the estate, Evie steps out of a Rolls-Royce and accidentally bumps into a maid carrying wine glasses. A sharply dressed man, the mansion's butler, arrives and begins scolding the maid. Evie takes the blame, saying it was her fault. The butler insists it's the maid's error, continuing to lecture her. Annoyed, Evie tells him off for his rude behavior. Walter, a mysterious man, appears and diffuses the tension. He and Evie are introduced formally, and Oliver reinforces the introduction. In the next scene, the same butler leads Evie to her room. She's amazed by the luxurious hallway. Mrs. Swift, the housekeeper, takes over and shows Evie a room that exceeds her expectations. Mrs. Swift points out a ringer Evie can use to summon help and shows her a portrait of the late lady of the house who recently passed away. Evie goes to sleep and dreams of running through the mansion. When she stops, she sees a strange man watching her from a distance. She wakes up with a start and leaves her room. As she walks through the dark hallway, she sees the butler speaking to the maids. Suddenly, Mrs. Swift appears and tells Evie it's unsafe to wander the halls at night, urging her to return to her room. The next morning, Evie wakes to a knock on the door. Her new family is waiting for her. Downstairs, she's greeted by Oliver and introduced to Uncle Julius, who warmly welcomes her. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the butler instructs two maids to accompany him to the basement to prepare a room. As they begin setting up, the lights start flickering and eventually go out, plunging the room into darkness. Strange sounds, screaming, scratching, and clattering fill the air. One of the maids appears to be trapped, but the screen fades before we see what happens. Later, Evie returns to her room and finds a stunning golden dress waiting for her with a note from Walter. On a call with Grace, she's startled by a noise hitting her window. That evening, Evie attends the wedding party and meets bridesmaids Victoria and Lucy, who already know who she is. After a short chat, Lord Walter makes a grand entrance. He approaches Evie at the bar, takes her hand, and surprises her by inviting her to the first dance, an expected tradition for the lord of the house. As they dance in the center of the ballroom, they engage in a flirty, intimate conversation. Walter then takes her hand and leads her to a private annex of the mansion. There they stay and talk about how all the orphan cousins have somehow ended up in one place. A few more conversations take place, such as Evie asking the Lord if he ever feels bored living in such a secluded mansion. During these conversations, both of them are leaning against the corner of a table, and with the sound of fireworks in the background, they begin kissing. In the next scene, we see the Lord greeting guests at the party and chatting with Victoria about his experience with Evie. Then we see see Evie sleeping in her bed as strange, unsettling events begin. The curtains sway in the wind and whispers echo in the room. Whispers of Evie's name. She wakes up frightened, and when she looks up, she sees a hand pressed against the window pane. She crouches on the floor and notices eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, Walter appears out of nowhere and calms her down. Walter asks Evie if he can stay in her room for the night, saying she shouldn't be alone if she's scared. They share the bed. The next morning, Evie wakes up mid-conversation with Walter, only to have Victoria and Lucy burst into the room. Victoria holding a robe. When Evie asks what's going on, Lucy tells her it's spa day and urges her to come along. At the spa, while Evie is getting her nails done, Victoria dives into the pool. A strange and increasingly invasive question and answer session begins between Victoria and Evie. Frustrated by the odd interrogation, Evie moves her hand and a cuticle pusher accidentally cuts her finger. As she tries to leave, Victoria jumps out of the pool and disturbingly licks the blood from Eve's wound. Shaken, Evie returns to the hallway and goes to a drawer to retrieve a key to a room she was forbidden from entering on her first day. Inside, she accidentally drops a file. Upon opening it, she finds detailed documents containing her personal information, name, family history, everything. We next see Evie in her room packing a suitcase. Walter enters and asks why she's packing. She confronts him with the documents, accusing him of stalking and manipulation. Walter tries to comfort her, saying he genuinely likes her and wanted to know more about her. The tense moment turns into an intimate one as they start kissing, leading to a passionate scene. The next morning, they wake up in bed together. Walter tells Evie about a formal family dinner and says her dress is already waiting in the closet. Later, she arrives at the grand dining hall where all the guests are seated and wearing ornate masks. Walter begins the dinner by naming the 4 families at the table and kisses Evie's hand. Suddenly, the pleasant dinner turns horrific. Walter announces his marriage to Evie and the unification of the lost family bloodlines. In a shocking turn, one of the maids is murdered by the butlers who slit her throat and collect her blood in a bowl. The blood is then poured into 3 glasses and served to Walter, Victoria, and Lucy. Evie, horrified, begins to remember that the woman in the portrait hanging in her room isn't the late lady of the mansion. It's her great-grandmother, Emmeline. Realizing the truth, Evie jumps from her seat and runs for the exit, but the staff blocks her way. She begs to go home, but Walter instructs Victoria and Lucy to take care of her for the night. They carry Evie to the cellar where they reveal the horrifying truth. They're not human, they're vampires. They try to calm Evie, telling her she can have eternal life, too, if she joins them. They lock the terrified and screaming Evie inside a small, dark room, leaving her alone for the night. The next morning, Mrs. Swift opens the door and helps her out. When Evie asks why she's helping, Mrs. Swift reveals that her great-grandmother Emmeline was a dear friend. She gives Evie instructions on how to escape the mansion. Evie begins running through the passageways, and suddenly all the bells in the mansion start ringing, alerting everyone that something is wrong. Everything turns into chaos. The workers start looking for Evie, and one of the butlers is walking around with an axe. Evie runs out of the mansion and hides in a small wooden shed nearby. A man comes in, throws a body inside, and just as he is about to leave, he hears Evie quietly crying. He begins to look around, but Evie quietly sneaks out, locks him inside, and runs away. As night falls, she finds a small house in the forest. A woman opens the door, lets her in, and offers her some tea while her husband makes a strange phone call. Evie feels something is wrong, so she stops drinking the tea and tries to leave, but the woman hits her from behind and Evie falls unconscious. In the next scene, Evie wakes up in a bed. Walter is there. He claps for her escape attempt, but says it was useless. She will never get out. Evie faints again. Later, we see her walking down the aisle. She's about to marry Walter. After the wedding, Walter gives her his wrist and asks her to drink his blood to become like him. Evie pretends to agree, but then she throws a pot of fire on the floor and sets the room on fire. She stabs Walter and runs down the hallway. She fights Victoria and kills her, then fights Lucy and kills her, too. After that, she kills the butler and goes back to the burning room where she pushes Walter into the flames. In the final scene, Evie is back in New York. She and her friend Grace walk into a new shop, Evie's own business. That's where the movie ends. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.